This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
You know the joke? We have all heard it, or, some version of it at least.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if you grew up watching television in the 90s or early 2000s, it was basically the punchline of half the sitcoms on the air.
Right. It's everywhere.
It is. It's a staple of stand-up routines. And, if we are being honest with ourselves, it's probably the subtext of a few awkward conversations you have either overheard at a dinner party or even been a part of yourself.
Yeah, the classic trope.
Exactly. The joke goes like this. Men are biologically hardwired to want sex constantly.
Right.
They're depicted as this uncontrollable force of nature.
Completely at the mercy of their biology.
Right. And women supposedly just don't want it.
No, they have to be coaxed.
Right. Coaxed or bribed with the, doing the dishes.
The old core play concept.
Yes. Chore play. Or they are just perpetually dealing with this mysterious lingering headache. You have absolutely heard the trope. But we're going to ask a question today. What if the punchline of that age-old joke is actually resting on a massive, paradigm-shifting scientific misunderstanding?
It is a brilliant place to start, I think, because that stereotype isn't just some harmless joke.
No, not at all.
It is so deeply embedded in our cultural consciousness, in our media, and this is the crazy part, in our medical assumptions, that we rarely actually stop to question the mechanics behind it.
You just accept it.
Exactly. We tend to just accept this so-called libido gap as a fundamental, unchangeable fact of human biology.
Like gravity.
Like gravity. But today, we are looking at research that challenges that assumption entirely.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We have a truly groundbreaking academic paper on the docket for you today. It introduces a comprehensive new framework called the Biodevelopmental Learning Opportunities and Outcomes Model.
Which is a total mouthful.
It is a massive mouthful. So the researchers brilliantly shortened it to the Bloom framework. Yes, thankfully. And our mission for this deep dive, it's pretty ambitious. We are going to solve the mystery of the libido gap.
We are.
And here's the setup I want to plant in your mind right now as you're listening. To solve this mystery, the answer isn't about innate biology.
Nope.
And it actually isn't just about the quality of the sex people are having right now in their adult lives either.
Which surprises a lot of people.
It surprised me. To figure this out, we have to take you on a journey back in time to the absolute most awkward, highly sensitive, hormone-fueled, desperately uncomfortable period of your life.
We are going back to adolescence.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and we are going to look at the adolescent brain in a way you have probably never considered before.
But before we completely dismantle the old theories and start talking about, middle school dances and brain chemistry, we have to understand exactly what we're looking at here.
Right. The baseline.
Yeah. What is the libido gap by the numbers? Because I think it's really easy to just dismiss it as a cultural myth, right? Like, oh, that's just patriarchy talking. But the data actually shows a real discrepancy, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, the gap itself is not a myth. When researchers talk about the libido gap, they are referring to a measurable difference in the behavioral, cognitive, and emotional drive to seek out sex. And the data the researchers compile in this source is pretty striking. They describe it as a moderate to large effect size.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because effect size is one of those terms that just sort of floats around in academia.
It does, yeah.
What does a moderate to large effect size actually look like if we were just walking down the street looking at everyday people?
That's a great question. So in statistics, effect size just tells us how meaningful the difference between two groups actually is, rather than just saying, hey, a difference exists.
Right.
To put it in real-world terms, a moderate to large effect size in this specific context means that about 3 in 4 women exhibit less baseline interest in sex than men.
3 in 4.
3 in 4.
That is not a marginal difference. That is a vast majority.
It is substantial. To give you a physical comparison, the researchers note that this gap in sexual desire is as reliable and as sizable as the difference in height or weight between genders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, think about how consistently obvious the height difference is between a large group of randomly selected men and women.
Right. You can just see it immediately.
Exactly. The psychological difference in sexual desire is just as thoroughly documented. It is as consistent as the gender differences we see in spatial cognition or physical aggression. It's a very real, very persistent statistical phenomenon.
Okay, so the gap is real. We're establishing that. The question then becomes why. And historically, we have had two major suspects.
The usual suspects, yeah.
Let's look at the first one, which
Yeah.
is the evolutionary or the biological argument. This is the idea that women are just wired differently from the factory.
Right. The hardware argument.
Yeah, exactly. The argument usually leans on the heavy biological costs of reproduction for females. Pregnancy, the immense physical toll of childbirth, years of nursing.
The sheer caloric and physical investment is huge.
Massive. So the theory goes evolution basically programmed women to be highly selective, cautious, and generally just less interested in the sheer frequency of sex compared to men.
Because men have a much, much lower biological cost for reproduction.
It's cheap for them.
And for decades, that evolutionary model was the absolute dominant narrative in biology and psychology.
It makes a certain kind of logical sense on the surface.
It does. It stems from older parental investment theories. But, as the authors of the Bloom framework point out, that model has massive glaring holes when you actually look at the nuances of human behavior.
Okay, lay it out for me.
Well, if women's lower libido is simply a fixed, evolved biological trait, basically a hardware limitation, then how do you explain the immense variability we see between different groups of women?
I mean, I would assume a hardware issue would apply to everyone with that specific hardware.
Exactly. But it doesn't. How does the evolutionary model account for the existence of highly sexual women?
Right.
Or, even more tellingly, how does it explain the data on sexual and minority women?
Oh, this is fascinating.
Women who partner with women lesbians often report significantly higher sexual desire and vastly more satisfying sex than heterosexual women.
That feels like a critical flaw in the biological argument.
It really is.
Because if a lower sex drive is an evolutionary mandate designed to protect the female body from the costs of reproduction, it shouldn't just magically disappear because the gender of her partner changes.
Exactly. The biological hardware is exactly the same.
Precisely.
So the evolutionary model just falls apart under that level of scrutiny. And furthermore, it completely fails to explain the wild fluctuations in sexual desire within a single woman's lifetime.
Oh, like changing from year to year.
Or partner to partner. A woman's libido can change drastically across different relationships. She might have a very low drive with one partner and a voracious drive with another.
Yeah.
It can change across different phases of the exact same relationship or immediately following major life events. A purely evolutionary, static biological model just doesn't account for that level of plasticity.
It basically treats women's desire as a dial that evolution just permanently superglued to low.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. But the reality is that the dial is constantly dynamically moving.
Okay, so if it's not strictly a biological hardware issue, we have to look at suspect number 2.
The contextual explanation.
Right. And I feel like this one has gained a lot of cultural traction recently.
It definitely has.
It basically argues that women want sex less because the sex they're currently having in their adult lives is just, it's worse.
Yeah, it's often called the pleasure gap argument.
The contextual model looks at the immediate environment. It suggests that women are experiencing fewer orgasms, they're taking on far more emotional labor in their relationships, they are exhausted from the mental load of managing a household and a career.
Right.
Therefore, the argument goes, of course they don't want to have sex as much. The context is terrible.
And honestly, that sounds incredibly intuitive.
It does. I know plenty of people who would hear that and say, yes, absolutely, I'm way too tired from managing everyone's life to even think about sex.
It captures a very real adult dynamic.
It is incredibly intuitive, and it certainly captures a reality for many adult women. The mental load is very real, and the adult pleasure gap is real.
But the Bloom framework details exactly why this contextual model also fails to be the ultimate root cause answer for the libido gap.
Really? How so? Because if the sex is worse and the stress is higher, doesn't that perfectly explain the drop in desire?
It explains a drop, yes, but it doesn't explain the universal persistence of the baseline gap itself.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Think about it this way. If the libido gap is solely driven by the bad quality of current adult sex or the current burden of household chores, then we should see the libido gap shrink or expand wildly, depending on the cultural context, the country, or the generation you look at.
Oh, I see. Because the quality of adult sex and the division of household labor varies wildly across the globe and across different decades.
Exactly. We have data spanning across completely different cultures, across drastically different economic systems, and across different birth cohorts.
Right.
Consider societies that have made massive systemic strides in gender equality and sexual liberation over the last 50 years.
Okay.
In places where the quality of adult sex for women has arguably improved and where household labor is shared much more equitably, you would expect the contextual model to predict a disappearing libido gap.
But it doesn't disappear.
It doesn't. The baseline libido gap remains stubbornly entrenched across all those demographics.
Wow.
The contextual factors might exacerbate it, certainly, but they are clearly not the foundational cause.
Here is how I was thinking about it as I was reading through the research. I love a good analogy.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you are trying to figure out why a car won't start. The evolutionary argument is like looking at the car, scratching your head, and concluding, well, it must have been manufactured without an engine. That's just how this model is built from the factory.
Which completely ignores the fact that sometimes under different circumstances or with a different driver, the car runs perfectly fine.
Right. So then you move to the contextual argument. That's like standing next to the stalled car and saying the car won't go anywhere because the traffic on the highway today is absolutely terrible.
Right.
Which might be entirely true. The traffic today might be awful. But it doesn't explain why the engine wouldn't turn over yesterday when the roads were completely empty.
That is a perfect way to frame it. The Bloom framework suggests that the real answer is much deeper and more developmental. It's not that the car lacks an engine, and it's not just the current traffic conditions. The real answer is that someone filled the tank with the absolutely wrong type of fuel during the very first test drive years ago.
Oh, man.
And it permanently damaged the fuel intake system's ability to process fuel in the future.
So, if it is not our fixed genes, and it's not just our current adult partners, what is it? We have to shift our focus entirely here. We have to look at when we first learn what sex actually is.
And that pivot is crucial. The researchers propose a radical shift in perspective. They argue that women do not have an unequal capacity to want sex. They have fundamentally unequal opportunities to like sex when they're first learning about it.
Wow. I want you, the listener, to really brace yourself here. Think back to your own adolescence. Because the statistics we are about to go through regarding adolescent sexual debut are incredibly sobering.
They really are.
The researchers lay out an irrefutable case that adolescent sex is statistically the most punishing and the least rewarding for a very specific demographic. That is, women and girls who debut with men and boys.
The paper introduces a helpful acronym for this demographic, which we will use, WBM. Women and girls who debut with men and boys.
Okay, WDM.
And when we look at the costs associated with the early sexual debuts of the WDM group, the gender disparity is nothing short of staggering.
We really have to look at the environment in which this learning is taking place. Let's start with the physical and medical risks. For a teenage girl, the fear of pregnancy isn't just some background thought. It is a massive looming shadow over the entire experience of sex.
It dictates everything.
And the numbers back up that terror. The researchers compiled data showing that only 12 to 41% of pregnancies are planned in adolescence.
Right.
Compare that to 58 to 69% in adulthood. But it's not just the lack of planning. If a young woman in that WDM group gets pregnant as a teenager, the physiological risks are terrifying.
They're huge.
The risk of miscarriage is astronomically higher, around 34% compared to 11 to 15% for adults.
The biological toll on a developing body is just immense, and beyond pregnancy, there is a disproportionate risk of sexually transmitted infections for young women due to both anatomical vulnerabilities and the power dynamics in adolescent relationships.
Right.
But we also have to look beyond the purely biological costs here. The psychological and social punishments are equally severe.
Oh, the social aspect is brutal.
The data highlights a vicious, persistent double standard. Girls often lose crucial friendships as they gain sexual experience. They are ostracized.
Yep.
Boys, on the other hand, do not suffer similar social losses. In fact, their social status among peers typically elevates after sexual debut.
The sheer weight of that stigma, the fear of ruined reputations, the intense parent-related worries, the anxiety over body image in a society that hyper-scrutinizes young female bodies. All of these factors weigh infinitely heavier on young women.
Without a doubt.
And we have to address the darker side of this as well. The statistics show that first sex is more often forced or coerced for women than men.
Yes.
Even when they report being a willing participant, young women report much higher rates of partner pressure.
It creates an environment characterized by high anxiety, high risk, and significant potential for physical and emotional harm.
So we have clearly established that the cost and the punishments of adolescent sex are wildly disproportionate for young women. But in any behavioral analysis, we have to look at both sides of the ledger, right?
I do.
This raises the critical question: what about the rewards? If the risks are astronomical, is the biological and emotional payoff at least equal?
Not even close.
Not even close.
This is where we hit what is often called the orgasm gap. But the researchers specifically focus on the pleasure gap at first sex. And they note something incredible. The pleasure gap at first sex is one of the largest psychological differences on record between genders. Period.
That is wild.
Let's unpack why that is, because it's not an accident. To understand the mechanics of sexual debut, the researchers point to a sociological concept called the coital imperative.
The coital imperative.
Yes. This is the deeply ingrained cultural script that dictates what real sex is. In Western culture, and many others, frankly, the coital imperative defines sex almost exclusively as penis in vagina penetration.
Right. If you are a 15-year-old or 16-year-old with zero experience, you aren't exactly improvising.
No, not.
You are operating entirely on this inherited cultural script. You've seen it in movies, you've heard it referenced in music. But here is the massive, glaring anatomical flaw in that script. It practically guarantees male pleasure and orgasm while bypassing female pleasure anatomy almost entirely.
The anatomical reality is just stark. The statistics on this are eye-opening. At first sex, gland stimulation, specifically clitoral stimulation, which is biologically central to female sexual arousal and orgasm, is a minority occurrence.
A minority occurrence.
The data shows that only about 40.6% of young women experience it during their sexual debut.
Less than half.
Less than half. For men, gland stimulation during debut is practically universal because the coital imperative basically requires it.
So fewer than half of young women in that WDM group are even getting the basic physical input required to trigger a rewarding sexual experience.
Exactly.
The script is fundamentally broken from day one. It is a game rigged against them.
And what's truly insidious about this broken script isn't just that the first time is bad.
Oh, it gets worse.
It's how it permanently lowers the psychological bar for what women expect from sex moving forward. The researchers reveal a fascinating and honestly deeply depressing divergence in how men and women define satisfying sex as they age. By the time they reach adulthood, men typically define satisfying sex as an experience that explicitly includes immense physical pleasure and climax. It is an expected baseline.
I remember reading this part of the study and literally having to put the paper down for a second. How do young women define satisfying sex?
The data shows that young women often define satisfying sex merely as an encounter that is free of pain and free of degradation.
It's free of pain and degradation.
That's it.
That is the ceiling of their expectation.
Yeah.
Not fireworks.
Yeah.
Not profound physical release. Just, well, it didn't hurt and I wasn't humiliated.
It's sobering.
Let that sink in for a second. I want to try and translate this into a non-sexual context so we can really grasp the absurdity of it. Imagine your introduction to a brand new hobby.
Okay.
Let's say it's a wildly popular new video game everyone at school is talking about. You finally sit down and play it for the first time. But the rules of the game dictate that merely turning on the console causes you intense, heart-pounding physical anxiety.
Right.
If you talk to your friends about playing it, you will be socially ruined and called terrible names.
The social cost.
Yes. And on top of all that, the controller you were handed is actually fundamentally broken, meaning you have absolutely zero chance of actually winning or enjoying the game.
You literally can't win.
You can't win.
Yes.
The best possible outcome is that the controller doesn't physically shock you while you hold it.
It is an exercise in futility and punishment.
Exactly. If that was your first experience with a video game, would you ever want to play it again?
Absolutely not.
Would you wake up the next morning feeling a spontaneous internal drive or desire to seek out that game in your free time? Of course not. You'd avoid it. You'd only play it if someone heavily pressured you into it.
This perfectly illustrates the transition to the most complex part of the Bloom framework. We've established with fairly overwhelming data, I think, that adolescent sex is objectively terrible for a vast majority of young women in the WDM demographic. It is a high-risk, high-punishment, and incredibly low-reward environment. But the skeptic might say, Sure, the first time is awkward for everyone. People grow up, they get better at it.
Right, the practice.
Why does an awkward, unfulfilling, or even painful encounter at age 16 have the power to dictate a woman's biological drive and sexual desire at age 30 or 40?
This is where we leave the realm of sociology and dive straight into the deep end of brain science. And I'm fascinated by this. We are looking at the cruel irony of neuroplasticity.
To understand the mechanism here, the researchers utilize a core neurological concept called experience-expectant learning.
Experience-expectant learning.
To grasp this, we have to look closely at how the adolescent brain functions because it is entirely different from the adult brain.
Very different.
During puberty, the brain enters a hyperplastic state. It is highly malleable, and importantly, it is not just passively receiving random information, it is biologically primed, almost hungrily waiting to encounter very specific types of developmental experiences.
I think of it like a sponge that has been perfectly dried out, sitting on a counter, just waiting for a drop of water. The biology of the brain is expecting peer socialization.
Yes.
It is expecting to learn how to navigate hierarchy, and crucially, it is expecting sexual development and sexual encounters.
That sponge analogy is very apt. Let's look at the specific brain regions involved here, because the timing is everything.
Right.
During this exact window of puberty, the socio-emotional circuits in the brain, the regions like the amygdala and the striatum, which process reward, intense pleasure, fear, and social connection, mature much faster than the cognitive control circuits.
Okay, so the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic, restraint, perspective, and long-term planning, is still heavily under construction.
Exactly. So you have a brain that feels everything intensely, values rewards highly, but has very little ability to contextualize those feelings logically.
Wow.
This neurological mismatch creates what psychologists call the reminiscence bump.
Oh, I love the reminiscence bump. It explains so much about human behavior. For you listening, if you've ever noticed how the music you listened to in high school hits you harder on a visceral level than anything you discover in your 30s.
Oh, absolutely.
Or how a book you read or movie you watched at 15 feels like it permanently altered your DNA. That is the reminiscence bump.
Exactly.
Your adolescent brain, driven by those hyperactive socio-emotional circuits, encoded those experiences with a special, supercharged hedonic value. Those memories and preferences stick with you forever because your brain was in its absolute most receptive, sensitive state for recording pleasure and forging identity.
Now, take that exact same neurological mechanism, that supercharged recording system, and apply it to sexual learning.
Okay.
The developing organism's brain is waiting for an expected experience sex in order to encode it as a rewarding, motivating biological drive for the rest of its adult life.
Right.
The brain basically says, okay, show me this activity, let me feel the reward, and I will create the chemical pathways that make us crave this activity in the future.
Makes total sense from a survival and reproduction standpoint.
It does. But here is the twist in the Bloom framework, and it is a major one that upends a lot of those evolutionary assumptions we talked about earlier.
What's the twist?
The data reveals that women actually possess a higher degree of sexual plasticity than men.
Hold on. That feels incredibly counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, if women's drives are the ones shutting down or appearing lower in adulthood, wouldn't that imply they're less adaptable, not more?
You would think so at first glance, but it's exactly the opposite. The researchers present substantial evidence showing that women's sexual desire is actually more responsive to their environment and their experiences than men's.
Really?
Yes. They are more plastic. They are fundamentally better at learning from sexual encounters. We see this in clinical data all the time. A woman's desire can adapt to different partners, shift its focus entirely, or alter drastically after major life events, much more fluidly than a man's desire typically does. Men's desire tends to be more rigid and less dependent on contextual learning. Women are, biologically speaking, superior sexual learners.
So if they are the best learners, how do we end up with the libido gap?
This is the cruel irony of the whole thing. Women are the star pupils in the classroom of sexuality. Their brains are perfectly primed to learn and adapt.
Right.
But because of the coital imperative and the punishing social structures of adolescence we just discussed, these exceptional learners are handed the absolute worst possible learning material. And they are handed this terrible material during the exact narrow developmental window when their hyperplastic brains are permanently absorbing the lifelong rules of sexuality.
It is a perfect storm form of bad timing.
It really is. Think about it. If a woman's brain is actively expecting a rewarding, intensely pleasurable experience so that it can encode sex as a positive, sought-after biological drive to create that lifelong appetite, but instead, the sensory input it actually receives is physical pain, intense fear of pregnancy, crushing social anxiety, and a complete absence of orgasm.
What does that highly intelligent plastic brain learn?
Right. What does it learn?
It learns that sex is a threat. It learns that this activity is dangerous or, at best, just an unrewarding chore.
Exactly. The brain does what any smart biological system would do. It effectively de-incentivizes sexual desire.
Wow.
It calculates that the immense effort and profound risk of seeking out sex do not yield a corresponding biological reward. Therefore, the internal drive to seek it out diminishes. It's a protective mechanism.
That is fascinating.
And the researchers highlight an incredibly telling data point here, honestly one of the most important in the entire paper. Delay of orgasm in adolescence is the sole predictor of sexual desire difficulties in adulthood.
The sole predictor. When I read that, it completely reframed my understanding of this entire issue.
It changes everything.
It really does. Because it is not the delay of sex itself that damages the adult libido. If you wait to have sex, that doesn't inherently ruin your drive.
No, not at all.
It is the delay of rewarding sex. If you have sex early, but it isn't rewarding, and you continue to have unrewarding sex for years, your brain encodes that specific lack of reward.
Precisely. It creates a powerful neurological association. The physical behavior of sex is performed, but the expected biological payoff, the dopamine rush of orgasm, the profound physical pleasure, is chronically absent.
It just never arrives.
Over time, through repeated exposure to this deficit, the brain simply stops generating the anticipatory desire for an activity that continually fails to deliver.
It makes so much sense.
It is not a malfunction. That's the key takeaway. It is a highly adaptive, entirely logical response by a plastic brain to an impoverished environment.
So when we look at the women who say they just have low desire, it isn't that their hardware is broken.
No.
It's their brain working exactly as it should, efficiently protecting the organism from wasting energy on a high-cost, low-reward activity.
You nailed it.
But as a critical thinker, I have to ask a question here. If this theory is truly accurate, if the libido gap is truly about bad learning material during puberty rather than bad biological hardware, then we should logically see exceptions to the rule.
We absolutely should.
We should see evidence of high desire in populations where the learning material is actually different.
That is the ultimate test of the Bloom framework. Does the data back this up? Are there specific populations of women who experience different learning material in adolescence, and do their adult libidos reflect that difference?
If the libido gap is caused by women learning that partnered sex with men is unrewarding during adolescence, what happens when the circumstances change? This brings us to the proof in the exceptions. And the data the researchers provide here is absolutely fascinating to me. Let's start with the most common alternative sexual experience, solitary sex or masturbation.
This is a crucial data point. When researchers measure the gender gap in desire for partnered sex, as we discussed, the gap is large, that 3 and 4 metric.
Right.
But when researchers utilize physiological tracking and detailed surveys to measure the gender gap in desire for solitary sex, that gap shrinks significantly. Men and women are much, much closer in their baseline desire to masturbate.
Which completely undermines the evolutionary argument that women just have a naturally lower sex drive across the board.
Completely.
If the drive is there for solitary sex, the hardware is fully operational.
The engine runs fine.
The engine runs fine.
Yeah.
So why the difference? Because when a young woman has her first solitary sexual experience, she is the one in total control of the environment. She isn't following the broken coital imperative. She is exploring her own specific anatomy, which means her first solitary experience usually includes direct clitoral stimulation, and crucially, it very often results in an orgasm.
It is a highly rewarding, low-risk experience. There is no fear of pregnancy, no social stigma in the moment, and high physical reward.
Perfect learning conditions.
Right. Her brain's socio-emotional circuits receive the exact expected biological payoff. Therefore, her plastic brain learns to desire it. The fact that adult women maintain a high baseline desire for solitary sex proves that their innate capacity to want sexual pleasure is perfectly intact.
It is specifically the partnered context with men that has been systematically de-incentivized.
Exactly.
That is such a clear, undeniable piece of evidence. And the second major exception the researchers point to is just as compelling. Sexual minority women, specifically queer women. The extensive data on monosexual women who partner exclusively with women lesbians shows a remarkably different landscape. They report significantly better sex, much more consistent orgasm rates, and markedly higher overall sexual desire than their heterosexual counterparts.
And the Bloom framework explains exactly why this is, because their sexual scripts are not bound by the heterosexual coital imperative.
Right, they aren't following the same broken rule book.
Their early sexual experiences, their learning material during that critical plastic window, are much more likely to prioritize mutual pleasure, whole-body touch, and specific clitoral stimulation. Because the learning material is fundamentally better and more rewarding, the resulting adult desire is encoded much stronger.
It makes perfect sense. But then the researchers look at bisexual women, and the data gets really complex and incredibly nuanced here.
It does.
Bisexual women report very high overall sexual desire, often higher than heterosexual women. But they frequently report a significantly lower enjoyment of heterosexual sex compared to their enjoyment of sex with women.
The researchers in the source material theorize something truly groundbreaking here. They suggest that bisexuality or pansexuality might, in some developmental cases, emerge as a form of adaptive flexibility.
I really need you to unpack that. What does adaptive flexibility mean in this specific context?
It connects back to the idea that women are superior sexual learners.
Okay.
It means that if a young woman has a naturally high innate sex drive, but she continuously encounters unrewarding, painful, or frustrating sexual experiences with men during her adolescent learning window, her highly plastic brain might adapt.
Adapt how?
Instead of just shutting the drive down completely, which happens to many women, as we discussed, the brain might adaptively redirect that high sex drive away from men and toward partners who offer better chances of mutual pleasure and reward.
Wow.
Yeah.
So sexual diversity among women might, in part, reflect this profound experience-based learning. The highly plastic brain essentially says, okay, this high drive energy needs an outlet, but the standard male outlet we keep trying is broken, punishing, and yields no reward. Let's look elsewhere for a better return on investment.
That's the theory.
That is a radical, fascinating way to look at the development of desire. It strips away the pathologizing and looks purely at adaptation.
It perfectly aligns with the Bloom framework's central assertion that women are exceptional sexual learners adapting optimally to their environments.
Yeah.
But if we accept that, it leads us to a necessary hard conversation about the environment itself.
Right.
If the the cultural script and the educational environment is actively creating this libido gap by handing young women terrible learning material, how do we fix the system?
We have to talk about sex education. Because according to the researchers who authored this paper, our current model of sex education is completely, fundamentally, almost intentionally broken.
It is. The authors argue that modern sex education, across the vast majority of curriculums, focuses almost entirely on the absolute floor of ethical sex.
A floor?
It teaches young people how to avoid disease, how to prevent pregnancy, and, in more progressive districts, it covers the basics of consent.
And let's be clear, those things are incredibly important. You need the floor, but they represent the absolute bare minimum of human interaction.
All right.
Imagine a driver's aid class that only taught you how to put on a seatbelt and brace for a crash, but never actually taught you how to steer the car or where you might want to drive.
That's a great analogy.
Sex ed completely ignores the ceiling, which is pleasure, mutual satisfaction, intimacy, and desire.
And this omission is highly, highly gendered. Think about what is traditionally taught to middle schoolers. Boys learn about erections and wet dreams. They are explicitly taught that their bodies will spontaneously produce pleasure and desire. Girls, on the other hand, learn about menstruation, the mechanics of the birth canal, and the intense dangers of pregnancy. They're taught almost exclusively about function, maintenance, and pain.
I remember my own middle school health class so clearly. It was just an awkward gym teacher sweating profusely, pointing a laser pointer at a terrifying diagram of a fallopian tube.
Everyone has that same story.
It's universal. The clitoris, which, anatomically speaking, is the sole human organ dedicated exclusively to pleasure, is rarely, if ever, accurately mapped or discussed in a standard sex ed classroom.
It's completely absent, and it's worth noting how the researchers view the current educational frameworks in their paper. They specifically point out that abstinence-only curriculums, which are often rebranded today as sexual risk avoidance education, tend to frame sex as inherently and uniquely dangerous for young women.
Which reinforces the exact anxiety that ruins the learning process we just talked about.
Precisely. According to the authors, this specific educational framework positions young women primarily as passive gatekeepers of sex. Their assigned societal job is to mitigate risk, manage male desire, and say no.
Right.
It completely strips them of agency, rather than framing them as active participants and equal seekers of mutual pleasure. To counter this, the researchers advocate for a concept they call cliteracy.
Cliteracy, it's a great term. What does it actually look like in practice?
It means teaching shared, comprehensive anatomy across all genders. It means teaching young men and young women alike about the erectile and vasocongestive properties of the clitoris.
The actual science of it.
Yes, it means explaining its embryological connection to the glans penis, that they are developed from the exact same tissue, and emphasizing its central, non-negotiable role in female sexual response and reward.
Because if you don't teach it, the silence speaks volumes. Think back to your own sex ed class, listener. Was the word pleasure ever uttered by a teacher?
Probably not.
Was female orgasm ever presented as a normal, healthy, expected baseline part of a sexual encounter? For the vast, vast majority of us, the answer is a resounding no.
And that absence is incredibly powerful. The researchers call this phenomenon the hidden curriculum.
The hidden curriculum.
When an educational system completely omits female pleasure from the syllabus, it teaches young women a powerful, silent, and destructive lesson. It teaches them that their pleasure simply does not exist, or at the very least, that it does not matter enough to be mentioned.
And if the adults in the room, the educators, the doctors, the parents, won't even acknowledge it, why should a 16-year-old girl expect it from her equally uneducated teenage partner?
Exactly. She learns to accept the floor. She learns that sex without pain or pregnancy is a victory, and she expects nothing more.
So if we pull all these disparate threads together today, the statistics, the neurobiology, the sociological scripts, and the educational failures, what is the ultimate conclusion of the Bloom framework?
The conclusion is quietly revolutionary, I think. The libido gap, this massive cultural touchstone we've built so many jokes around, is not a life sentence handed down by our evolutionary ancestors.
Well,
it is not an innate, unchangeable biological deficit in women. It is a learned response.
It is a highly adaptive logical response by an aggressively plastic brain to an environment that offered terrifyingly high risks and incredibly low rewards during the absolute most critical window of adolescent neurological development.
Women don't inherently want less. They have just been taught through a lifetime of broken scripts, bad anatomy lessons, and absent rewards to expect less.
But here is the hopeful part of all this. Because the brain is plastic, and because women are exceptional adaptable learners, that script can be rewritten.
It absolutely can. The path forward requires a fundamental shift in how we socialize young people. It requires comprehensive education that includes mutual pleasure as a standard expectation, not an anomaly. It requires dismantling the coital imperative and redefining what sex actually is.
We started this deep dive talking about a tired old sitcom joke. But looking at the sheer weight of this data, the reality is that the joke is on us for accepting a broken, punishing system for so long without questioning the actual mechanics of it.
We really need to rethink the whole foundation.
We do. As we wrap up today, I want you to take a moment and reflect on your own early experiences. Whether they were solitary or partnered, whether they were clumsy, wonderful, terrifying, or affirming. Look back at them through this new lens of experience-expectant learning.
It's a powerful exercise.
How might those specific fleeting moments in your teenage years be quietly, invisibly steering your current desires today? How much of what you think of as your natural drive, your innate personality, is actually just a highly entrenched learned habit?
It is a profound and sometimes unsettling lens through which to view our own lives and our own development.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you. Keep questioning the assumptions you've been handed.
Heliox is produced by Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. It features reviews of emerging research and ideas from leading thinkers, curated under their creative direction with AI assistance for voice, imagery, and composition. Systemic voices and illustrative images of people are representative tools, not depictions of specific individuals. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other episodes, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.